Gentlemen, welcome. Hercules, let me start with you, if I may. In the future, what data will we need to capture to demonstrate the value of an airport presence to a brand? I mean, just how can we do that?
I think it's a really interesting question because the question around data isn't always about what data we need. It's how do you stitch it together? So we are currently in an environment where you are able to get mobile phone tracking data to understand where people are moving. You're able to get credit card data to understand what people are buying. And you're also able to get purchasing data in terms of how frequently they're buying the items. So on one hand, you've already got what people are buying, how frequently they're buying. If you link that back with the airports and the fact that they have movement intelligence and they're tracking where people move, they can already identify where people are going. So I don't think it's a question of what data that's been a challenge, it's about how you stitch it together. And currently there hasn't been any intelligent enough systems to be able to stitch the very disparate parts of the data together which can make meaningful insights. So for me, it's more around identifying what are the right sources that you can blend together. And I think the three that I mentioned there are the first most important ones, and that's available today. And the smart retailers are already doing that.
So the smart retailers are threading it?
Yes.
So where do you go from here? What's the next step?
For me, I think it's around an individual retailer can only understand what is going on with his customer in his store. And he can only influence that person once they come into the store, or maybe with a slight bit of digital marketing before they come into the store. The real value for an airport operator is providing that data not just to one retailer, but actually bringing that all together to be able to tell a story for all of their retailers, for all of their customers continuously. And what we're seeing is moving away from this historic, this is what my customer did, I'm going to see if they're going to do it again, versus what is my customer doing right now in the mall or in the airport, and how we can influence that spend or that trip as well.
So it's a hybrid between active and predictive?
That's correct, yes. And that's why I think it's the stitching together which is going to be more and more difficult, because there's going to be more data points, and you're going to need far greater AI to be able to predict you, and then not just do predictive analytics of what's going to happen, but prescriptive analytics to say, well, if that happens, if X happens, you should do Y.
Ib?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no data expert, but what I really believe is that we have got to get into a position whereby a landlord, albeit an airport or shopping centre, but in this case an airport, can prove to a brand what impact it has in terms of how many media impressions it can drive with its presence in an airport. In other words, an airport has the potential to be the most powerful media platform for a brand. And how can it drive the media impressions, whether it's Instagram followership, whether it's YouTube views, whether it's online engagement? How can the airport prove or demonstrate to a brand that being in the airport can drive those, and how can we measure those? How can we find the data to measure the media impressions that we can drive? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not a data guy, but think about the retail space. Let's call it the physical space, not retail space, the physical space in driving recruitment of customers. In other words, acting and behaving like a media brand. And if we can capture the data to demonstrate how powerful that is and that it works, which I believe it absolutely would do, then there's an opportunity to develop new revenue models, new lease models, and I think it can be extremely powerful.
Yeah, I think, if you don't mind me adding on, I think the interesting thing about that, Ib, is actually we talk about this phrase of monetizing eyeballs, right? You're monetizing people that are seeing your brand, whether that be physical or digital. And actually, the smart retailers, and there's not many of them, but the smart retailers, are actually thinking of the customer not as an individual transaction or an individual purchase, but what is the true lifetime value, or the LTV, or the customer lifetime value of that customer. So therefore, if you are able to get to the point where an airport can say, okay, we've seen your consumer, Mrs. X, she came into the airport, she browsed this particular item, she went on the plane journey, on the way back home, she actually bought something on Instagram. If an airport or retailers can get to a point of actually identifying where the initial customer acquisition happened, that is going to be the most valuable, because that's where a lot of the media spend is spent the most. It's around getting the first customer or getting that first purchase. But what we're seeing is the smart retailers are the ones investing in truly understanding the end-to-end life cycle of that customer through not just a 1-year period or a 2-year period, but actually the full lifetime of a customer.
Allow me to just to build on that, if you don't mind, Peter. I think that what's really critical here is that if we think about the physical space less and less about a channel for distribution and more about moments of experience, and therefore think about, as I said, the physical space as a media platform, the opportunity that delivers is not just how a legacy retailer who is actually selling stuff as a distribution channel. The opportunity it gives us is it attracts new players. New players to the airports. It attracts brands, organizations, businesses that will see, and their whole culture, their whole business case is based on taking physical space as a recruitment platform for
That
customers.
has to give airports a new lifeline.
Completely. And I'm talking about pure players, culture brands, media brands, broadcast brands, entertainment brands, and many others. I think that's how we've got to reposition the airport, and therefore the impact that has is immense in terms of the design of the environment, the design of the terminal, the master planning, the experience, the service proposition, the technology, but much more importantly, the revenue model. And I think it's a complete cultural shift.
Lewis?
Absolutely. The understanding the purpose, the real purpose and value of data for the landlord, if you like, is the sense of proof of audience. Who is my audience and what are they doing when they interact with my people in my airport or the spaces in my airport? How were they introduced to that experience? What did they do next? What exactly did they do there? So I think that data should be geared towards giving a sense of proof of audience in terms of not just quantity, but the quality of that engagement before, during and after the journey. So with proof of audience, the landlord can say, look guys, come to my airport, do your thing, create a great experience, because here's the audience you're connecting with, not just here, 1 hour before the flight, but before and after. The data, if you like, is evidence of proof of audience, and therefore the quality, if you like, of the likely return on investment that anyone would care to make in terms of their brand engagement, their brand experience and so on. But it's also proof of what happens beyond the airport as well. It provides, if you like, a sense of what is the airport doing to really engage with that audience? Why would that audience be interested in that airport other than just after they arrive and after they depart and there's no more conversation, no more interaction? So data is simply a kind of way for an airport to really realize actually it's a brand. It needs to behave like a brand itself. A brand has a consumer base and audience, if you like, and every brand wants to know what that audience thinks about it, minute by minute, second by second. So data needs to provide not just the evidence of what the audience is doing on the journey to, through and beyond the airport, but also what they're doing in terms of their sentiment towards that airport brand itself. How likely are they to kind of sense, to really want to share or to engage with or connect with that brand as well? So data needs to show us lots of things, and I think from what Herculano was saying, there's a kind of sense that we can have that opportunity. It's available to us now.
But we're data starved though, because there's no sharing.
Absolutely. Now that is we've all been in industry events where the silo mentality has been decried, and we're all aware that there's a larger piece of pie and there's much more for us to do. I think, as we've talked in many sessions, now is the time to really look at that very, very hard. Data, the availability, the cross-fertilization of data is our opportunity. And I think, as you've alluded to earlier on, we need to break down those barriers. It's an industry priority, frankly, because it's not, from a customer's point of view, they don't care about those silos. They want a better experience, a better journey, and data can allow us all to create that better experience by giving better insights and better understanding of how to personalize or customize a journey, or to speak with relevant offers or propositions to that in each individual customer, to reward each individual customer, to say, thank you very much, this is the 15th time you've been in Heathrow this year. The other 15, we didn't know you, we didn't care, but this time we've sorted it out and we've got the data. here's a voucher, here's a discount, go and do something, enjoy yourself. So data offers all of these opportunities, and we are clearly not exploiting them as we should.
Peter, if I just build on that from a different perspective, and that is, what does this all mean to the terminal? What does it mean to the physical space? As designers, Lewis and I are designers, our business designs at airports. What's the impact of this type of space that behaves like a media brand, that captures data? How does it manifest itself physically? We've got to think less and less about concrete walls, glass fronts, gondolas and light box retail, and move to creating fantastic environments where an airport is in a brilliant position as an enclosed terminal to create a one whole wonderful experience that is programmable, that is modular, it's built as a kit of parts, it acts like a stage, it acts like an exhibition, and the impact that will have is that I think it will reduce costs of build and it will reduce costs of operations.
It may also reduce the size of the incumbent retailers because of the newness that's going to be introduced, because that's what the data will show.
Yeah. I think the most interesting design airport that I've seen most recently was the new Istanbul airport. And what they had done was they had unpacked the retail to make it like a department store. So to your point, Ibs, if you're thinking about it as a platform or a stage, whether they had the right brands in there or used the right data to get to that point is a different discussion. I looked at the brands and wasn't wholly impressed, but the way they had deconstructed the retail rather than being in boxes in corners, but actually kind of like a department store in sections and different departments across the airport space was actually really interesting. And however, I want to pick up on the point that you said, Lewis. A lot of the work that I do is with shopping centre owners and retailers. And I work with the big ones like Westfield, Simon Properties in the US. And we always talk about airports being the holy grail of data, right? Because you know exactly how many people are coming to the airport. You know when they're checking in, you know when they're walking through the doors, you know who they're with, and you probably know where they're going. So you know what mood they're going to be in when you go there. And I've always found it fascinating that we speak to airport clients and they don't share this. They don't, even the security teams in the major airports won't share that, even anonymized level data with some of the marketing teams. And it baffles me that there is access to what I would call the holy grail of data, that airports are not doing this. And the real estate industry, shopping centres, are not known to be very innovative. I can be honest and say that they're pretty far behind most people. However, over the last 3 months, with the COVID-19 as a major accelerant in terms of trends, consumer behaviour, we've seen 4 major landlords come out and publicly state they're going to go with a new model. It's not just going to be about the minimum guaranteed rent, it's going to be about footfall top-up, it's going to be about omni-channel replenishment, and they're going to have a tiered approach to different retailers. And I find that very interesting, and it really is a reckoning for the airports.
So who are these landlords?
Hammerson, which is Hammerson PLC, which is a UK landlord that own assets like the Bullring in Birmingham, L&G, which is Legal & General, traditionally a conservative real estate investor, a range of retail parks and city centre assets, and there's a couple of others who I cannot mention. But those are 2 landlords which are traditionally not going to be seen as the most innovative space and innovative companies, and they're trying new models because they have to.
So could these models be applied to airports?
The short answer is yes, but is the appetite there, right? And we talk a lot about, one of the reasons why the landlords are doing this, right? There's a lot of talk about we're coming out of the COVID era in a new normal, right? And the challenge that I have with this phrase, the new normal, means that we're going to go back to something that was like before and it's going to become normal. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're moving into a phase
I think we'd all agree with you.
Never normal. It's never normal, and everything is going to be continuously changing. We need to be, I don't want to say the word agile, but we need to be flexible and nimble enough. And the new models that the landlords, L&G, Legal & General, that came out with, it is a flexible model. It's 4-tiered for 4 different types of retailers, a big flagship to a small mom and pop store. And they have these different types of models. So yes, it is there, but the question I'm going to put back to you is the airports appetite there?
I think that the wider point that Herculano makes, I think, is a very important point, and I think this hasn't happened enough in the industry, is what can we learn from the domestic market? What can we learn from these real estate owners and retailers? And I think what we are, your point about agility, what we're seeing is what we refer to as retail Darwinism. We're seeing customers, consumers, their behaviour changing much faster than these businesses can adapt. They're not agile enough. And I think this is what we've got to do. Customers, did we hear about TikTok 6 months ago? Customers are shopping and engaging with platforms that just come about immediately. And how do you respond to that? And we're going to see the point with Instagram. I think Instagram, will become and is trialing as a shopping channel. And when it does become universal, it will happen very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Are we in a position to respond quickly enough?
I mean, you're right to beg the question. I mean, what airport management have to move towards is effectively to step out of their entrenched, embedded conservatism. I mean, they don't take risks. Mm-hmm. If they do take risks, it's extremely limited. The situation now is wholly different from anything you've ever experienced before. They have little choice but to change. Mm-hmm. And we hope that what's being discussed here today is going to give them permission to do that, because everything's been mapped out in a way that they should and need to take action, because otherwise, they're going to be dead ducks.
I think to that point, Peter, this idea that, and essentially the whole discussion around data is a sense of potential and opportunity. But when we engage with our clients, they say, well, show me the proof, show me the evidence, show me the precedent. And I think there's this, what you speak to there is a kind of the conservatism of the industry is kind of holding it back in that sense. The sense that we need the assurance of a guaranteed revenue income from whatever proposition you propose, whatever new idea you propose. And I think that kind of thinking is understandable. We have to take that on board. So if you like, the responsibility of all of us is to really define what that revenue opportunity is with data. And what does it mean to capture it? What does it mean to process it? What does it mean to react to it, to do something that makes it useful and monetizes it as an asset, to create an asset out of it? And it was talking about the impact of data, or what data tells you about space and architecture. There is no doubt that data can tell us a lot about how efficiently or inefficiently a space is being used. The question is, like every retailer and every landlord will say, I need flexibility. But operationally, if the data tells you you've got a dark space, or if the data tells you customers aren't giving you a positive sentiment around a part of your experience, you need to be able to react. What processes, what systems, and what architecture, what technical services, what enables you to go, gosh, I've spotted something on my dashboard. I need to raise the bar over in this area of my terminal by changing the size of that space, or changing the ambiance, or putting something more biophilic in, or whatever it is, and we can create those KPIs around what performance is. So I think the data is one thing. We need to demonstrate what data is useful to us, because in terms of creating audience, a valuable audience, and ensuring that we both maintain it and build it, what do we need to do? What does that data do? And how does our building, and how do our teams, and how do our people, how do we enable that to happen? The conservatism we talk about is understandable, as we say, because the implications of data are far, far reaching. Not just getting it, not just having it, but by having it, there's then a sense of, now is my opportunity, now is my, if you like, responsibility to use it properly to help me build this offer and to make more revenue from it.
Developing that, Lewis, I mean, how can we understand the true value then of airport commercial space?
Well, I think we need space, and true value of space is one thing. So I'll come to that one in a moment, but I think there's also a sense of journey. What is the true value of the journey, if you like? So data can tell us about, individual, as Herculano says, individual customers. We have data on those individuals, even before they get to the airport, right? And so can we engage them before? Can we create value in terms of that conversation and sort of point them towards propositions, ideas, offers, and so on? So I think data is definitely about understanding, well, how good is my data at really engaging each individual who's coming through my airport at any given moment? then for sure, yes, along the journey, along the real estate, or once I cross the demise and enter into the airport experience, whether it's security, whether it's the commercial area, again, understanding what is that experience like for a cohort or for an individual. And then within this space, the traditional metric, if you like, is sales per square metre, sales per square foot, as we say in the UK. But, you know, that, of course, we know, if we offer a customer or a passenger a great experience and they go on to buy something at home, we need to capture that value as well. If somebody talks to a sales associate, that's valuable as well. If they walk away from that conversation with a smile, that's better than walking away with a frown. If I get an email address through that conversation, that's better. So there are lots of points of interaction, of engagement that we're not effectively measuring that would tell us how efficient our space is and how efficient our sales associates are in engaging people in that space, whether people like that space or not, how they feel about it, and so on. So I think that the tools are there. There are many, many tools for us to help us understand how efficient space is, both in the moment of being in the space, but also about what happens next. And how did I get to that space? You know, what was my role in getting you into a conversation, and it's not a random thing that happened, as most airport shopping experiences feel fairly random. Oh, I see something interesting, I'll go and look at it. The big sort of innovation was disruption. Disruption is a way to attract attention. I think we're past that. I think we need to be sort of helping people plan what they're doing with their time in space by proposing the ideas and propositions to them that we know that they will want. The data will tell us what they will want and what is relevant to them. So we're not throwing away that valuable person and their time that they could spend with us in our space.
I'd like to introduce Adil Rouhani to this conversation. And you've got a clear comment to make, haven't you, on this?
I think so. The true value space, I mean, it depends on what we base it. We can't base it on the past. On what business model are we basing it? There's very little traffic. There's too much space. So the value has gone down. The question is, who will monetize in the future the airport environment the most? Will it be the airport itself? Will it be the retailer? Will it be the airline or the brand? We need to take one thing into consideration. Today, many people buy by talking to a piece of plastic. Okay, this is something we do not reflect at an airport. Relevance and context will change the value space, because I do believe that there is much more valuable concept one could come up with that would touch a lot more people and that would enhance health, well-being, safety, travel, all the things that COVID-19 made us be aware of. You can pack that into a concept, but it has to be a concept that remains true to its origin, not to start here and then to bastardize it in a model that is more profitable. And data monetization is definitely something that one can do, but one also needs to understand that there is a lot of data that is not being looked at. There's a lot of concept that is not being looked at because they weren't profitable enough. So we need, the value space will need to be redefined over time.
From my perspective, and it is very interesting because a lot of retailers have invested heavily in their data analytics. In fact, if you look over the last 3 years, the number one area where most retailers and even shopping center owners have invested infrastructure is on technology, which is on data. What they've found is that they're starting to collect so much data that they're unable to do anything with it. And there's the old 80-20 rule, which Pareto's law fits in everything. And in the data context, where it sits is 80% of the time spent on data analytics at the moment is on cleaning up the data. 80% of the time, right? And 10% is spent on doing some, reporting, and then the 5% is spent on, trying to do some predictive analytics. And what we're really trying to do, where we think about democratizing dashboards and data and insights, when we are talking about the tools that are out there, it is really about trying to shift that 80-20 rule to say, actually, 20% of the time should be on reporting and cleansing the data, and 80% of it should be on predicting, prescriptive analytics, helping to identify, to make those personalized choices. Because the reality is, if you go back to your example, if you're thinking about actually collecting that data from a smile, someone's collecting it on an email, so that's going to be on a paper, that might be on a clipboard, and then you think about, well, the mobile phone data, there's just so much data out there. And it goes back to the point I mentioned in the beginning. It's not what you do with the data. So it's not how much data you have, it's actually what you do with it and how you stitch it together. And I think that is the biggest challenge, is how do you invest in the right tools, and you create, and I don't want to say this phrase too often, but you create a sandbox environment. And it's about enabling tests of different data experiments in a safe environment before rolling it out. And a lot of retailers invest in this amazing technology that tracks where people move in the store, and you understand their facial recognition, but they don't really think about what they're going to do with that. And I think you need to start with that first, do it in a small test box, do some data experiments before you start mass deploying interesting personalization.
Are there any other guiding principles you would recommend?
I think the most important one is start with what you're trying to achieve first. There's a lot of people who invested a lot of money on just capturing and building data sets. What they found was actually buying all of this data set or buying all this equipment that collected this data, they were unable to connect it. It could be as simple as putting a 0 on the Excel column on one of the tools, and the next one actually starts from 1. And all of those data points don't connect together, so actually what happens, you're spending most of your time cleaning it. So for me, the guiding principle is don't buy data for data's sake, or don't capture data for data's sake. What you'll start with is what you're trying to achieve, and then you can figure out the ways to get there in the most effective ways, and always do with the testing. It's all about testing when it comes to analytics. It's not just about mass rollout. It's all about testing before you get any results.
I think I like this idea of deciding what it is you want to achieve, what is the data there to do. And if you look about the commercial imperative around that, to say, for example, what can I use data to demonstrate to a brand that I want to create a great experience, and I want 10 brands a year to create a great experience in this space here. What data will convince them to spend more, in terms of demonstrating the quality of the experience that people had and the quality of the audience that went through it and so on, so they can say, yeah, it's worth me putting that investment in. So simple things like that, that's what I need data to demonstrate to a potential brand partner, the value of being here at this time, and then the evidence after say, look, this is what we did. And I think another sort of valuable sort of sense of what do I want data to do for me would be the sense of what landlord wouldn't want that kind of window into each of its tenants to say, it's in your tenancy agreement, we're going to share a certain amount of data together which demonstrate how, for example, how happy your customers are, or how many email addresses you get, and we create this common database for an audience that we both share, whatever. So I think that data can be, you have that sense of, this is what I need to do because this is important to me. And I think that there aren't enough airports that have a clear sense of how they could use data and how could they benefit from it. And I think what we want to do is say, yes, it is complicated and it is expensive, but you've got to start somewhere. And you can start small in this idea of building the small steps to more shared, breaking down silos, demonstrating to brands the value of being in there, helping to build your own audience using your own brand, and so on and so on. Understanding the sentiment of your experience. So again, you can start to create a list of things that are important to you that demonstrate how you're adding value to or maintaining value of the journeys that you're creating for passengers.
I love Lewis's point about, excuse me, I love Lewis's point about how you measure different aspects of the experience, and the risk of being flippant. Maybe it's not minimum annual guarantee, maybe it's minimum annual clicks, minimum annual shares, minimum annual media impressions, minimum annual engagement, minimum annual smiles. What are the new guarantees that we're going to expect? And I think that okay, it's flippant, but it does shift the conversation and shift the paradigm.
But it's the mindset that needs to change, right? So if we think about this, we're talking about the conservatism that is in airport. If we think about Changi and what they've done over the last 5 years, they've invested heavily on changing the mindset in the organization. They built a digital hub, which was an extension, so an innovation arm as part of the airport. They built and invested a substantial amount of money to build this team which is going to disrupt internally. It's called DIVA, and they went to disrupt about how to collect data, how to measure consumers' experience. And what they were able to do is not just bring in new innovations like the nice wayfinding app that they were able to launch, they were actually changing mindsets. And I think that is the key thing, is how do you change the mindsets in organizations? And I think you have to be willing to take risks and invest in it.
Talking about mindset, I think we need to understand where we're coming from and where we're going to. We go from exclusive to inclusive. We go from isolation to integrated. We go from competition to collaboration. We go from store, brand to platform. We go from social media, we go to social retail. There's so many changes happening from customer to community. Are we feeling those mindset changes being recognized? Are they actually being used in order to reshape this infrastructure at an airport? Airlines tend to be able to go more with the trend, and that's why I do believe that the mindset change is also to walk a bit away from the airport is the landlord, because it is about collaboration. And I do believe that if you get those dots connected, that an airline, an airport, and a brand can continuously be connected to their customer, to their traveler, because they can actually enrich life. They can say like, hey, how was your trip? How was that whiskey you bought? There's so much more that needs to happen, but the mindset change on its own is followed by cultural changes that are happening whilst we're not even noticing that they are happening. I mean, there is so many changes happening that in the past we wanted everything to be tested. We did even test. No, now it's trial and error. Because this is how we have grown. This is how we have gone from building a product to curate the product and to make the product a part of your everyday life. It's a very different thing as what we see in the airport business, in the airline business, and how to restart an economy. Because I don't see that all those metrics, all those macroeconomical changes are reflected in a new world tomorrow. And I do believe that it is the sum of all, and it's not just this little element, that little element, and that little element. It is the sum of all things that can only be achieved with collaboration.
I think the way to change mindsets is that we've got to have a people revolution. We've got to have new types of people. It's not just in airports, in retail real estate. We've got to move away from thinking about the airport or the real estate as a piece of real estate that is about leasing, done by property people, or as a piece of real estate that has marketing in terms of communication. We've got to bring people in who are from the hospitality industry, from the entertainment industry. We need to bring ethnographers, journalists, writers, storytellers, curators, new type of experiences, new type of skills to kind of think about that space as a curated space that is formulated over kind of calendar years as a programmable kind of experience. And I think it does require new people and more diversity.
That's radical thinking. That might actually be beyond the pale for many airports. But actually, you can see the elegance in that thinking.
Yeah.
You asked us to be radical, so.
I did.
The challenge with that, no, not the challenge, the extension to your point there, is actually Scentre Group, which is a mall operator in Australia. They're actually called they own the brand Westfield. This is the traditional Westfield, that's where they started from. What Scentre Group did 2 years ago was they didn't just change the mindset, to change their programming, they changed the operating model. So what they did was they had a chief customer officer come in, and they actually replaced a lot of the customer-facing KPIs and customer-facing people directly to report up to the chief customer officer, not to the COO who's about switching the lights on, actually reporting back to what the customer experience is going to do. And so much so that they changed the reporting in a way where actually in terms of impressions and social media, in all of their malls, the mall managers or the center managers were actually competitively measured by the consumer sentiment within the catchment around the mall. So using social media analytics to understand what people are saying about the mall, is it good, is it negative, is it a family place, is it community? And they have a weekly report that goes out to all of the center managers on where they rank from a customer sentiment perspective. So they changed the operating model to be customer focused. And whether it's working or not is up for debate, but it's being that radical that I think is going to have to happen in airports as well.
I mean, if you're in any consumer-facing business, any retail business, you've got to be customer-obsessed. Everything you do throughout your whole organisation, the customer must be absolutely a centre.
Yeah, thanks to Amazon.
Thanks to Amazon.
But I think this idea of this mindset shift and different skills, very different types of skills, which can deliver and help us deliver something very different. I think it's really fascinating. It plays in very much, something that we, if in a sense, you could say we play lip service to it. People are our greatest asset and so on. So what does that really mean? It's kind of a bit trite. But when you think about it, actually, it's the skills that the people have. It's their focus being on the consumer properly and the enablement of them for them to actually sort of put that person first. But I think that what's happening everywhere is the sense that the relationship that we all have with sales associates or brand ambassadors. I mean, I don't like the phrase brand ambassador because it suggests somebody who's just paid to do a job rather than loves what the brand is all about and lives it and so on. So the syntax of everything that we talk about is wrong in one sense because we want a different meaning, we want a different understanding. We want sales associates who represent you as a customer and who know you and us and me as customers, who have those relationships with customers. They don't have the relationship because the badge above the door is the guy they work for and you're just some random person that walks through. So we see lots of domestic retailers developing sales associates to enable them to say, you go and have a Instagram relationship with that customer, you're their personal shopper. Create a followership of thousands. In the old days we had Rolodexes and you'd come with a Rolodex and say, look at the people I know. It's equivalent today is like we want people, invest in people who understand their customer, who have relationships with individual customers. And again, data can sort of enable that and using digital tools can enable that. And of course, if that relationship is digital and it's voluntary because the data is volunteered and we don't have any limitations around GDPR and so on, it means that we've got much more powerful data as well. So if we can get to a point where the quality of the data is better because the quality of the service that people are getting, the benefit of sharing their data is evident in every journey and evident in every exchange with that airport, with every journey that they make, then I think the quality of the data can go up because it's voluntarily given. I don't think many people see really the benefit of voluntarily giving up to another brand. And when you go on an airport journey, you've got to give up your data to potentially 4, 5, 6 brands. So why would you? It's just too complicated. That's too much email in your inbox at the end of the day. So I think that we need to get better at making people believe that the quality of the way that we manage that information, and it's through the human connection that then the data is actually worthwhile sharing.
I'd be very cautious to give my data to any airport. I'm very cautious to give my data to most companies because I know what data goes in there. But for me, if I think about the utilization and where I'd give my data to, Google, very loosely, I use it for Google Maps, it's really great. Everything else in Google, I delete it immediately. Amazon, it's the convenience, right? There's not many other brands that I would share all my data.
Facebook?
Nope.
No.
Instagram, yes, because I'm still trying to be cool. But
You don't need to try.
Facebook, I don't want to go into that. That's a whole nother monologue.
No, ditto. Same feeling.
But my point being is, if I don't trust a brand like Facebook, how are consumers going to trust brands that they interact with? If you go to the airport 3 times a year, if you're a traditional, family going on holiday, you go to the airport 3 times a year, maybe 5, 6 times if you're not a business traveler. You're going to give your data to an airport, but what is the utility that they're going to get? Mm-hmm. How is that utilization really going to be used? So I think a lot of airports have invested heavily on capturing customer data, and it's the right thing to do. But is there smarter ways to do it? Is there partnerships they could have with the main street retailers on, the non-air side? And could they figure out ways to bring that data together? Because building your own platform and creating your own audience alone is very expensive. There's only one company that I've seen that have been able to generate an audience at scale in the last 2 years, and that was TikTok. A week tomorrow, a year ago, I was at a conference in Revo, and we were talking about TikTok. I asked people to put their hands up, and Revo, for those who don't know, is a real estate conference. So that you can imagine it's a very, very vibrant conference, an exciting conference. And I asked people to put their hands up, and there was probably maybe 5% of people who put their hands up. That was last year. TikTok has gone from 500 million users in 12 months to 2 billion worldwide. Right? They have created an audience. So when we talk about an airport and their audience and generating and creating an audience, whether they're going to do it with the right way in terms of security, I'm not wholly convinced. But do they really want to build that audience themselves? And how can they get the scale like the other companies out there? So I think it's more about genuine collaboration with the TikToks, with the social media companies, and with the brands.
Yeah. But I think people are willing to give data if they get something valuable and enriching and relevant back.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my favourite brand ever in the whole world is The Economist. I think it's the most compelling brand in the world. I would give them any bit of data they require because they give me so much value.
But for me, I think the demonstrable value can be convenience. Amazon is a company which I give my data to because they are convenient.
Definitely.
And I know during the pandemic, I ordered a bunch of stuff from some other retailers and it didn't turn up. I turned to Amazon and it works. And it's damn good when it works because they said it's going to come in 5 days and it came in 2 days and I was so happy. And I put on my new trainers and I did some running. But the point about it is it's not just about the loyalty brand that it's not just the emotional attachment that you'll have to a brand like The Economist, which is probably a more loyal relationship based on an interaction which is a more luxury experience or something like that.
Oh, an enriching experience.
Enriching
Doesn't
experience.
have to be luxury,
Yeah, it's an enriching experience. I can't say getting something the next day is very enriching.
Well, that is the point. And this is, I think, one of the critical points that we need to explore. When it comes to brand engagement and retail, what's happening is we're seeing, and COVID has accelerated this, we're seeing an extreme polarization from brands like Amazon that are hyper convenient, hyper simple, frictionless, and the value is in that simplicity where all complexity is stripped out, to the other end of the spectrum where the value is in immersive experiences, in personalized experiences, in storytelling, in sociability, in learning, and all those other enriching experiences. Any retailer that's stuck in the middle is dead. And this polarization, what we call fast and slow experiences, both of those are both digital and physical. It's not about online and offline. They're both physical and digital, both physical and digital. And one example that has that really amazing immersive experience, which I think will define the future of department stores and I think is a good pointer for airports, is Showfields in New York.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think this blurring of the lines, or as I call it, the squeeze middle. There is not going to be any lines. Those who are not able to offer the hyper-convenient or the hyper-immersive experience, unfortunately, will go away. And the same brand can do both. So Amazon can do the one-click. They're actually not focusing on one-click. In the future, they're going to be doing the zero-click, predictive buying. Before you even think about it, it's there because you bought so many times, they can predict what you're going to buy. And it'll become cheaper for them just to send you products and you to send it back for them to wait for you to choose to buy it. That's how uber hyper convenient. But Amazon, if you went into New York back in the last year, they had a partnership with a magazine company, and they had this beautiful store that I walked in, and it looked like a very trendy East London office space. It was cool. It was a partnership with I can't remember the brand, but it was a really cool magazine, a homewares brand. They had like maybe 20 items in the whole shop. And what you did there was about customer acquisition. What they were doing was selling magazine subscriptions. That's what they were actually doing. Yeah. And people were coming in there as a partnership with Amazon. So I think the same brand can do both, but you can't not do either.
So I think you're going to see these extreme polar opposites develop. And airports have got to embrace this.
Just take the audience through what Showfields do that is so wholly different.
It's a very immersive, theatrical experience that is populated by a whole series of different brands. Some traditional brands, like Gucci is there, but many of the brands are digital-first brands, online brands that have taken space that are not for transaction, but are for immersive experiences, and they drive traffic online. And much of the transaction actually happens online via mobile in the store. So online is coming into the physical store. So customers won't distinguish between online and offline. They'll flip from one to the other, minute by minute, second by second. So much of online retail will happen in store, or buying will happen in store. And once we see, I think, the universal uptake of 5G and what the power that's going to bring, we're going to see, I think, a universal kind of growth of image recognition. And then once you're there and you'll be able to be in an airport, take a photograph of someone's rucksack and buy it there and then on that platform, maybe Instagram, or take a photograph of something in a store and buy it and get it delivered to your destination, where does that leave transactional physical retail? Where does it leave light box retailing? Meter after meter of bottles of whiskey or gondolas that are fixed to the ground and immovable. It's yesterday's news.
So I just want to pick up on a point actually that Herculano made a while back actually, which is just when we were talking about data and the new value of data and this connection to lifetime value, if you like. So this understanding that data enables you to understand how long you managed to create or acquire a new customer. Was it a one-off bottle of whiskey? Or was it like for the next 10 years, or the next 15 years, that somehow that moment in our airport had an influence over that lifetime of purchasing. And so I think there are a lot of businesses who are playing in this idea of like actually the transaction happens elsewhere. Peloton, for example, is the kind of subscription model. So I think this idea of working with brands who are very good at engaging with their customers both online and offline is an area where, as if you were going to say, let's recommend the kind of tenant and the kind of concepts that you need to be working with in the future, we would recommend that airports seriously consider prioritizing brands who are really good in the online and offline space, who create this journey that is both a fantastic physical one, but also a fantastic online one as well, and can create it in a kind of continuous fashion, so the customer is continuously moving across those platforms. Because the data that then, if we have a window into that data, we understand our role as an airport in acquiring that customer, in maintaining that customer and continuing that relationship with that customer as well. And we know the value of it. We know how much that brand is benefiting from that introduction that we facilitated, in that sense of it was our audience and you managed to sell something to our audience for the next 50 years. We'll take a piece of that. Now, I don't know, I'm not going to do the deal on that, but I know it's worth some money, right? But at the moment, we're not talking about what that value is. And we know that we, in airports and in shopping malls, have a role in that type of new transaction, that different transaction, which we can show through the evidence of data we had an impact on, and we can see how much it's worth.
And I would say that this conversation and this issue goes beyond retail. I mean, we need to think about what impact does this thinking have on other kind of experiences. What happens to the lounge experience? Why shouldn't we have a Netflix lounge that is part of the IDL that links to restaurants and retail? It's not enough to speak about it. Let's get it down on paper and let's draw some lines, let's do some planning and see how it begins to impact the actual physical design and the master planning. I think that is the key.
I think there's an interesting point now, because as we're going to see a slow return to normal traffic in airports, what is going to happen is that value of the space for a retailer, a traditional retailer that sells whiskey bottles, that value is going to be far less for the airport operator. So this is an opportunity for airport operators to say, actually, wait a minute, let's try monetize this space in a slightly different way, where we have, instead of having, to your point, instead of having the shared office at the back of the airport, have it in the center of the airport, right? However it could be worked. I actually think what we're going to see in the next 3 years is more experimentation in airports than we've seen in the last 15. And it is because COVID is an accelerant It took 10 years almost, or up to 2008, to get to the point of where they're at the pre-flight levels before the World Trade Centers.
Oh, right.
And in 2008, it took 10 years to 2018 for the same amount of traffic to come back to airports, right? So now what you've seen is actually you've got this period of it's not going to be as busy. It's not going to be as busy for a while. People aren't going to go back immediately. Even if there's a vaccine at the end of this year, it's still going to take at least 12 to 24 months to get that massively deployed across the country if everyone takes it. So I actually think there's a period now where airports can be more risk-taking and take more opportunities to try something different. Because that value of that space is going to go down and go down and down because the people aren't going to be there.
And the
And that space is going to empty as well.
And the key issue is monetising it.
Yeah.
How are we going to monetise it? I think it's happening in places. I think, you can see what Made.com are doing at Schiphol. Very interesting. But monetising that space is going to be the key.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I think I have to call time on that. And it has been a really stirring session, mostly because it has been actually solutions driven. And that's exactly what this webinar series has been all about.